There's never a situation where a building is beyond repair. It may be beyond economic repair. It's always a question of how far you want to go.
I was at South Georgia, I think 7 years ago. That was my last trip, and I've been here a number of times over the last really 30 years. Every time I'm there, I see one more building, one more wall, one more roof that has collapsed. But it's what we see, we have of course expected for years and years.
The whaling station's largely the same. Some degradation of a few buildings, some have really catastrophically gone. Many are very much the same.
One of the things I've been looking at is how the site has developed, comparing historical data, photographs, maps, to see what the site looked like when Shackleton walked in to the site at the end of his epic trek.
We go into Shackleton Villa to see how to make it stay forever. It's in very bad condition.
How to either restore it, or if it's too big of a cost to restore it, we have all the measurements that we could build a replica.
The actual significance of that building is pretty much unique.
They've got a cardboard on this side, and then the insulation on the other side, asbestos paper. The linings here, look, to the fuses, asbestos paper, asbestos composite back panels. The amount of different asbestos applications just in that one electrical bank there, and that's just 1 metre squared of a whaling station.
My brief for this job is to assess the condition of the structures to determine how long they can stay stable and whether we can do anything to prolong this stability. What we did on site, moisture measurement of the surface and the core of the elements to determine if they have been compromised due to corrosion. I needed to remove the corrosion product from the surface of the steel in order to measure the section loss. That will help us to establish, yes, whether the structural stability in general has been compromised to a critical point, or it can stay for now, and how long we can expect that particular part of the structure remain stable.
Particularly with the old manager's villa, building 16, it's primarily the lower part of that building which has decayed. The upper parts are okay, but replacing the lower part is always very difficult, because the upper part is obviously sitting on that. So it would be easier to take the whole building down than it would be just to do localised repairs.
It would be much easier to rebuild it in Grytviken, but then you're taking this Shackleton Villa away from the route where he came, and we understand that's very important.
But if you take the view that, the building in its original form is significant and important, and therefore we want to preserve as much historic fabric, then we take a different approach, which becomes more expensive, more difficult to do, but you do perhaps retain more of its historic significance.
The challenge of tourism and heritage aren't necessarily separate, they're complementary to each other. So if it was not for the tourism, and if it was not for the desire to take tourists into the whaling station, then the approach would likely be hands-off from the whaling stations and allowing them to degrade naturally, and a loss of heritage.
It is obvious that any removal, any cleanup of any kind will affect the heritage, because the entire station as it is now, and any bit of metal or planks or whatever it is by definition part of the heritage. And it is a balance how this can be done.
This is the 3D camera. When I push go, 3 seconds to get out the image. If you just like to go and stand down there. 1, 2, 3. Gotta be quick.
The beauty of it is that you can just keep revisiting. You just keep going back. So obviously they need one of these to get the benefit of the 360, but you can do it on the computer and sort of see what the hazards are, see what the buildings are. So for me, I'll look and I'll say, well, that building looks awfully close. Constantly sort of re-looking at things and reassessing things, so you're not sort of wanting to sort of rely on your memory.
Being South Georgia, being 8,000 miles away, there's no room for error here because you're on your own. That's empty. That's full. Oil.
I had to think about how to get the waste off the site and ship it back. A critical part of the operation, the most difficult in some ways, is to actually materials and equipment ashore. The old piers of the whaling stations are all too dilapidated to use.
The operational costs are huge because of where we are. There's a lot of steps that are going to be involved in making sure it's right. It's not a simple thing for us to plan.
The whaling stations are dangers to the wildlife. Most directly and most obviously, there are pitfall traps, so there are areas where seals can fall into and not get themselves back out of. Some of the buildings themselves can be a danger to the wildlife, especially with the collapsing doorways and causing entrapment within the buildings.
This is a viable project that is worth to go on further with. To look at into asbestos and those issues, to look into how some specific buildings could be rebuilt, to look at sort of the entire site as a heritage site, what should be restored, what should be saved.
Stromness is only one of the whaling stations. Recommendations have been made before that because this is a very unique set of buildings from a very unusual industry, that it would be worth recording the other buildings as well.
The environmental cleanup and the removal of hazards to wildlife would be a great bonus.
And what will be the outcome, how this will look in the end, well, it's reason to be optimistic, I think.